Hey, what up, Kipsters? It's Mr. Dudley here, and today I'm going to read with you The Starry Messenger again. This is the book that we read last week. Last week we read pages 1 to 13. This week we're going to read the rest of the book. Now, the pages are not numbered, and so you might hear me refer to these pages as page 1, 2, 3, and so on. We're going to act like we restarted our page numbers for this book because the pages aren't numbered, and I don't want you to get confused whenever you're doing your lesson. So, on the questions in the lesson today, if it says PowerPoint page 1, that's talking about this page right here. It's the first page we read today. So in the slides today, I will put PowerPoint page, and then this will be the page number that you can find your answer on according to these pages that we're reading today. So this is page 1 for today, okay? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so that we can go ahead and get started reading. I'm going to read through pages 1 to 9 first, and then after that, we will then read the rest of the book. So give me 1 second to try to zoom in. My computer's acting a little funny right now. Can I move that? That stinks. Okay, sorry about that, guy. I think now I can do it. I had to change my computer settings, so sorry about that. I'm going to zoom in and go ahead and start reading. Remember, this is going to be page 1 for today. The Starry Messenger. That's too much. Let's see, 200. The Starry Messenger. Revealing great, unusual, and remarkable spectacles, opening these to the consideration of every man, and especially of philosophers and astronomers, as observed by Galileo Galilei, gentleman of Florence, professor of mathematics in the University of Padina, with the aid of a spyglass, lately invented by him. So it's talking about Galileo inventing the spyglass. I'm not going to read the rest of that. It gets a little tricky to read, and it's going to be a little difficult to understand. So we're just going to go ahead and skip that part right there and read the next italicized words over here on the right side of the page. It is a beautiful thing and most gratifying to the sight to behold the body of the moon. The moon is not robed in a smooth and polished surface, but it is in fact rough and uneven. So these writings are telling us that when Galileo was studying the moon, he noticed that it wasn't smooth, as some people might think. It actually has a rough and uneven surface. So it says, night after night, he gazed through his telescope and wrote down everything he observed. Then he published his observations in a book, which he called The Starry Messenger. Is that a little... That's a little similar to our book, right? That's probably why this is called The Starry Messenger, because that's the book that Galileo was writing in when he was doing his observations of space. Let's go to the next page. I'm going to try to read this for y'all really quick. I got to zoom in a little bit. There are astronomical arguments. So, guys, remember, this is now page 2. We just read page 1. This is page 1. And now we're on page 2. Goodness, sorry, my computer is a little tricky. There are astronomical arguments derived from many things in I can't read that word, it's too blurry, I'm sorry, celestial discoveries that plainly confute the Ptolemaic system, while ironically agreeing with and confirming the contrary hypothesis. That's a fancy way of saying that his discoveries of celestial bodies, which are bodies out in space, was much different from the Ptolemaic system, which, if you remember, believed that the earth was the center of the universe. And he was saying that his discoveries and looking in space was proving that to be wrong. So, covering everywhere, just like the earth's surface, he's talking about the moon still, with huge prominences, deep valleys, and chasms. So this is what he was observing from the moon when he was studying the moon, these things that he's writing down in his journal titled The Starry Messenger. I'm going to skip this section right here because it's cut off a lot of it and it's going to be hard for us to read, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. This is now page 3. And again, these are going to be difficult to read, but these are just quotes from Galileo, so let's try to get through those really quickly. I cannot get to it. They're just a little difficult to read, guys. I'm sorry. It's hard to zoom in. On this app on my computer, it will only zoom in a certain amount. So let me see if I can customize my zoom. Oh, okay, perfect. So it says, I know rather what suspects are not what they really are, it being much harder for one to discover the truth than to refute what is false. So these are things that Galileo was saying about the way that the planets and things used to be studied, but how he is seeing that it's actually much different than what people have thought before. It says Galileo was amazed by what he could see with his telescope. So before this invention, there had been no real way for people to look and study in space. As you can see in the illustrations where Galileo is drawing pictures of what the solar system and things look like. You can see that here on page 3. And now on page 4, these are more illustrations from what he was seeing in outer space. So it says, chief philosopher and mathematician to the Medici court, Galileo leaves Padua for Florence. Oh, excuse me. So I read that wrong, guys. Excuse me. Give me 1 second. It actually starts down here. Galileo leaves Padua for Florence to become the chief philosopher and mathematician, to the Medici court. So as you can see in this picture, it's showing Galileo and Medici, showing all these people his discoveries of what he is seeing in outer space, and they're all looking like what is he talking about? They're interested in what he has to say about what he's been seeing with his telescope. So it says Galileo presents the Medicean stars to Cosimo de' Medici. So that's what he's doing in this picture here, presenting the Medicean stars to this person. So it says people read Galileo's book and they became inspired. He made maps of the heavens and dedicated the 4 newly discovered stars of Jupiter to his patron and ruler, the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Cosimo II. So he had discovered things that people had never seen before. And so this was a huge deal. He's presenting his findings to these very important people, and they're realizing that Galileo might be onto something now, right? So it's shown here, Galileo. You can see the stars. This is a play, I presume. And it says, let's see if I can zoom out a little bit. We can see the whole page. This is an illustration again. People watching. It says Jupiter and its moons, the Medicean stars. So it's showing us what their idea of Jupiter and its stars would look like. So gifts of a telescope and a copy of Galileo's book were sent to all the kings and princes of Europe, and Galileo was named chief philosopher and mathematician to the Medici court, which is a very important title. He was doing great things for discovering things in outer space with his telescope. So it says Galileo enters the comet dispute. As you can see, all these people are out in this field. It says Hercules is carrying the sky. That's a representation of Hercules carrying the sky. Let's keep on going. Remember, guys, that's page 7. It says Galileo's book was presented at the Frankfurt Book Fair and was later translated into many languages, including Chinese. So he was doing some great things, and everyone was interested in what he was doing. So these are just representations of the galaxy and the planets. And so let's go down to the caption. It says, the Medicean stars revolving around Jupiter. So this was a man-made representation of Jupiter and the stars around it. It says, soon Galileo was famous. More and more people celebrated the stars, and they celebrated Galileo and his discoveries with statues and parades and spectacular events. So they were doing all these things because Galileo was making great discoveries for everybody. These were things that nobody had seen before. It was crazy for them at the time. So it says Jupiter arriving among clouds. Again, this is just an illustration representation of what it would look like. And it says dialogue on the great world systems. That is in a language that I am not familiar with, guys. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce those words. But that is just what this is in English. Dialogue on the great world system. It says his fame grew and the celebrations became extravaganzas. So it became huge events. Look at all these people out here following the teachings of Galileo. So they weren't just, they started out as just celebrations, but they became extravaganzas, huge events with lots and lots of people. But since these events were getting so big and Galileo was in fact questioning what the church had believed and what everyone had believed about the galaxy, the church began to worry. And it says Galileo had become too popular. By upholding the idea that the earth was not the center of the universe, he had gone against the Bible and everything the ancient philosophers had taught before. So since he was going against what everyone thought before and what was in the Bible, he was starting to become an enemy of the church because he was becoming so popular. As you can see, all of these people are listening to Galileo, and the church was afraid that if they were listening to Galileo, that they might stop believing in the Bible because he was proving that something in there was not accurate, being that Earth is actually not the center of the universe, right? So I want you to go back into your lesson. You're going to answer a few questions. After that, we'll read the rest of the book. Remember, it's going to be titled as the PowerPoint page, and it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We read up to page 9, and the page numbers are at the bottom here as well.